The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Part 4. The boy had been working for the crystal merchant for almost a month, and he could see that it wasn't exactly the kind of job that would make him happy. The merchant spent the entire day mumbling behind the counter, telling the boy to be careful with the pieces and not to break anything. But he stayed with the job because the merchant, although he was an old grouch, treated him fairly, and the boy received good commission for each of the pieces he sold. He'd already been able to put some money aside. That morning he had done some calculating. If he continued to work every day as he had been, he would need a whole year to be able to buy some sheep. "I'd like to build a display case of the crystal," the boy said to the merchant. "We could place it outside and attract those people who pass at the bottom of the hill." "I've never had one of those before," the merchant answered. "People will pass by and bump into it, and pieces will be broken. Well, when I took my sheep through the fields, some of them might have died if we'd come upon a snake. But that's the way life is with sheep and with shepherds." The merchant turned to a customer who wanted 3 crystal glasses. He was selling better than ever, as if time had turned back to the old days when the street had once been one of Tangier's major attractions. "Business has really improved," he said to the boy after the customer had left. "I'm doing much better, and soon you'll be able to return to your sheep. Why ask more of life?" "Because we have to respond to the omens," the boy said, almost without meaning to. Then he'd regretted what he'd said, because the merchant had never met the king. "It's called the principle of favourability. Beginner's luck. Because life wants you to achieve your personal legend," the old king had said. But the merchant understood what the boy had said. The boy's very presence in the shop was an omen, and as time passed and money was pouring into the cash drawer, he had no regrets about having hired the boy. The boy was being paid more money than he deserved, because the merchant, thinking that sales wouldn't amount to much, had offered the boy a high commission rate, and he had assumed that he would return to his sheep. "Why did you want to get to the pyramids?" he asked. "To get away from the business of the display." "Because I've always heard about them," the boy answered, saying nothing about his dream. The treasure was now nothing but a painful memory, and he tried to avoid even thinking about it. "I don't know anyone around here who would want to cross that desert just to see the pyramids," said the merchant. "They're just a pile of stones. You could build one in your backyard." "You've never had dreams of travel?" said the boy, turning to wait on a customer who had entered the shop. Days later, the merchant spoke to the boy about the display. "I don't much like change," he said. "You and I aren't like Hussein, that rich merchant. If he makes a buying mistake, it doesn't affect him much. But we have to live with our mistakes." "That's true enough," the boy thought ruefully. "Why did you think we should have a display?" "I want to get back to my sheep faster. We have to take advantage when luck is on our side, and do as much as we can to help it along. It's called the principle of favourability, or beginner's luck." The merchant was silent for a few moments. He said, "The Prophet gave us the Quran and left us just 5 obligations to satisfy during our lives. The most important is to believe only in the one true God. The others are to pray 5 times a day, fast during Ramadan, and be charitable to the poor." He stopped there. His eyes filled with tears as he spoke of the Prophet. He was a devout man, and even with all his impatience, he wanted to live his life in accordance with Muslim law. "What about the 5th obligation?" the boy asked. 2 days ago you said that I had never dreamed of travel, the merchant answered. Well, the 5th obligation of every Muslim is a pilgrimage. We are obliged at least once in our lives to visit the holy city of Mecca. Mecca is a lot further away than the pyramids. When I was young, all I wanted to do was to put together enough money to start this shop. I thought that someday I'd be rich and I could go to Mecca. I began to make some money, but I could never bring myself to leave someone else in charge of the shop. The crystals are such delicate things. At the same time, people were passing my shop all the time, heading for Mecca. Some of them were rich pilgrims, travelling in caravans with servants and camels. Most of the people making the pilgrimage were poorer than I. All who went there were happy at having done so. They placed the symbols of the pilgrimage on the doors of their houses. One of them, a cobbler who made his living mending boots, said that he had travelled for almost a year through the desert, but that he had got more tired when he had walked through the streets of Tangier buying his leather. "Well, why don't you go to Mecca now?" asked the boy. "Because it's the thought of Mecca that keeps me alive. That's what helps me face these days, all the same. These mute crystals on the shelves, and lunch and dinner at the same horrible cafe. I'm afraid that if my dream is realised, I'll have no reason to go on living." "You dream about your sheep and the pyramids, but you're different from me, because you want to realise your dreams. I just want to dream about Mecca. I've already imagined 1,000 times crossing the desert, arriving at the plaza at the sacred stone, and 7 times I walk around it before allowing myself to touch it. I've already imagined the people who would be there at my side, and those in front of me, and the conversations and the prayers that we would share. But I'm afraid that it would all be just a disappointment, so I prefer just to dream about it." That day, the merchant gave the boy permission to build the display. Not everyone can see his dream come true in the same way. 2 more months passed, and the shelves brought in many customers into the crystal shop. The boy estimated that if he worked for 6 more months, he could return to Spain and buy 60 sheep, and yet another 60. In less than a year, he would have doubled his flock, and he would be able to do business with the Arabs, because he was now able to speak their strange language. Since that morning in the marketplace, he had never again made use of Urim and Thummim, because Egypt was now just a distant dream for him, as was Mecca for the merchant. Anyway, the boy had become happy in his work, and thought all the time about the day when he would disembark at Tarifa as a winner. "You must always know what it is you want," the old king had said. The boy knew, and now was working towards it. Maybe it was his treasure to have wound up in that strange land, met up with a thief, and doubled the size of his flock without spending a cent. He was proud of himself. He had learned some important things, like how to deal in crystal, and about the language without words, and about omens. One afternoon he had seen a man at the top of the hill, complaining that it was impossible to find a decent place to get something to drink after such a climb. The boy, accustomed to recognising omens, spoke to the merchant. "Let's sell tea to the people who climb the hill," he said. "Lots of places sell tea around here," the merchant said. "I know, but we could sell tea in crystal glasses. The people will enjoy the tea and then want to buy the glasses. I have been told that beauty is the greatest seducer of men." The merchant didn't respond, but that afternoon, after saying his prayers and closing the shop, he invited the boy to sit with him and share his hookah, that strange pipe used by the Arabs. "What is it you're looking for?" the old merchant asked him. "I've already told you. I need to buy my sheep back, so I have to earn the money to do so." The merchant put some new coals in the hookah and inhaled deeply. "I've had this shop for 30 years. I know good crystal from bad, and everything else there is to know about crystal. I know its dimensions and how it behaves. If we serve tea in crystal, the shop is going to expand, and then I'll have to change my way of life." "Well, isn't that good?" "I'm already used to the way things are. Before you came, I was thinking about how much time I had wasted in the same place, while my friends had moved on, and either went bankrupt or did better than they had done before. It made me very depressed. Now I can see it hasn't been too bad. The shop is the exact same size I always wanted it to be. I don't want to change anything, because I don't know how to deal with change. I'm so used to the way that I am." The boy didn't know what to say. The old man continued, "You have been a real blessing to me. Today I understand something I didn't see before. Every blessing ignored becomes a curse. I don't want anything else in life, but you are forcing me to look at wealth and at horizons that I've never known. Now that I have seen them, and now that I see how immense my possibilities are, I'm going to feel worse than I did before you arrived, because I know the things that I should be able to accomplish, and I don't want to do so. It's good I refrained from saying anything to the baker and Tarifa," thought the boy to himself. Then they went on smoking the pipe for a while, and the sun began to set. They were conversing in Arabic, and the boy was proud of himself for being able to do so. There had been a time when he thought that his sheep could teach him everything he needed to know about the world, but they could never have taught him Arabic. There are probably other things in the world that the sheep couldn't teach him either, thought the boy, as he regarded the old merchant. All they ever do, really, is to look for food and water, and maybe it wasn't that they were teaching me, but that I was learning from them. "Maktub," the merchant finally said. "What does that mean?" "You would have to have been born an Arab to understand," he said. "But in your language it would be something like, 'It is written.'" And as he smothered the coals in the hookah, he told the boy that he could begin to sell tea in the china glasses. Sometimes there is just no way to hold back the river. The men climbed the hill, and they were tired when they reached the top. But there they saw a crystal shop that offered refreshing mint tea. They went in to drink the tea, and it was served in beautiful crystal glasses. "My wife never thought of this," said one, and he bought some crystal. He was entertaining guests that night, and the guests would be very impressed by the beautiful glassware. The other man remarked that the tea was always more delicious when it was served in crystal, but the aroma was retained. The third said that it was a tradition in the Orient to use crystal glasses for tea because it had magical powers. Before long, the news spread, and a great many people began to climb the hill to see the shop that was doing something new in trade that was so old. Other shops were open that served tea in crystal, but they weren't at the top of the hill, and they had little business. Eventually, the merchant had to hire 2 more employees. He began to import enormous quantities of tea along with his crystal, and his shop was sought out by men and women with a thirst for things that are new. And in that way the months passed. The boy awoke before dawn. It had been 11 months and 9 days since he had first set foot on the African continent.